share my screen here. Thank you. Go ahead and start the recording. Remember how to do this. Cool. So thank you for joining us for the 2026 Education Chapter Annual Meeting. It's nice to see all your smiling faces. So the outline for today, first I'll give a little bit of an introduction to the chapter and then talk about some of the activities that we were involved in last year. Um, then we will have some breakouts discussion, do some reporting back, and then do some looking ahead to the upcoming year. We've got some exciting things that we're expecting that I'm eager to share with you all. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. One of the things that I was kind of curious about because I hadn't looked for a while was what is the purpose of this chapter? What is it that we are here to do and what are our goals? So these things are on the website if you're curious about them, and I think the goals are stated in more detail. But our purpose is pretty broad, right? It's the promotion of interest in and knowledge of applications of HPC and computational science. And in particular, there are five goals that we work on within this area. These are paraphrases, but we're aiming to promote the educational and scientific aspects of HPC, to help build community, to provide training on activities, tools, techniques that are out there, to help determine pathways and career paths for learning how to use these tools and then ultimately making a career out of them. And finally, to share education, training, and outreach resources. And so these are the things that we keep in mind as we are planning our activities. And hopefully these also resonate with you as resources and things that the chapter provides for you related to your work. These are the smiling faces of your officers. So there are 8 of us. There's a chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, and 2 general at-large officers, and then 3 for geographic specific regions. This is one thing that we've, I think, tried hard to do in the chapter is to make sure that our perspective is, not just say the U.S. perspective, but is global to the extent possible. I think, a lot of us are dealing with similar challenges, around the world. And there's a lot of value in being able to come together and share these things and learn from each other in a broader context. So, that's something that I think there's always room for improvement on, but I am pleased with the work that the chapter has done here. So what have we done last year? What are some of our highlights? So we held, as we often do, a pair of workshops, one at PERC and then also one at SC. Both of these were well attended. I had the pleasure of going to the SC one myself, and I always find them valuable and learn a lot. And so I very much appreciate the work that the workshop organizers do in order to get these things together every year. We had an outreach BOF at SC and also a chapter meetup. We recently, just last month, we held a webinar on generative AI and HPC education and training. I found this one particularly interesting. I think a lot of people are, we're obviously aware that this is a thing we have to figure out, what to do. But it was interesting to get in a room with other people that are also wrestling with this and hear some success stories and also some challenges and puzzles. And anyway, if you're interested, it's posted on YouTube if you didn't get a chance to attend it. And yeah, I think that it was a particularly interesting meeting from my perspective. We have a number of new blog posts up that spotlight members of the HPC community from around the world. So it's, again, always interesting for me to find out what other people are doing, what challenges they're confronting, what solutions they've come up with. We also early last year, we had put up a list of undergraduate research opportunities, which I received a lot of positive feedback on. And so I've done it again for this year for kind of May through August of 2026. This is another place where having an international cohort keeps me honest in that I used to call it the summer opportunities. And then Brian from South Africa kind of reminded me that May through August is not summer in the Southern Hemisphere. So, but I encourage you to check that out and send it to anybody you know who might be looking for research experience. And obviously, this list is definitely not complete. So if you are aware of other opportunities, especially opportunities kind of outside the US, I think we have good representation there, but not as well in other places. Please pass those along. I frequently update the list and would like it to be as complete as possible. So I want to move into opportunities for discussion because I think that one of the most valuable things about the annual meeting is the opportunity for us to hear from everybody and to have some good dialogue about, challenges and opportunities that are facing the chapter. So what I'm going to do now is hand it over to Brian, who's going to help to kind of explain our topics and lead us through the breakouts. While you do that, I'm going to figure out how to organize people because I don't see a breakout button for myself at the moment, but we'll get that sorted while you talk.
Thanks, Scott. I think the slide speaks for itself, but just briefly, what we're planning to do is break into groups. I mean, the number of participants, we were planning 5 or 6 members per group, and we're going to focus on 3 topics and for the next 20 or 25 so minutes. The first being, what does education mean now in the time of AI? And how has AI impacted what you do, or has it impacted you yet? Or will it at all impact you? And then the second topic will be, what do you wish that you understood better or knew more about, just generally with relation to your education, HPC community experiences? And then finally, what would help folks, yourself or people you know, to become more engaged in this chapter? Generally, you can talk about things that you'd like to see covered as maybe workshops or seminar series, topics, a particular way of connecting with people in your region or your groups, whatever you think would be useful to help us to grow the community. We're not looking for numbers, we're actually looking for engagement and involvement. So we'll talk for about 20 to 25 minutes in our small breakout groups. Then one allocated officer that's in each of those groups will then come do the report back, and I'll just step through each group at that stage to get the feedback. And I can do a juggling act if Scott's not ready, or I can come up with a dad joke or something. I don't know. Scott, how are you doing? A funny thing happened to me on the way to the theater tonight. There, there we go.
Yeah, no, I for some reason I'm not seeing the button to configure breakout. So Steve, do you happen to see that?
So while we're waiting, why do seagulls fly over the sea? Because if they flew over the bay, they'd be bagels.
Oh man, that's
Yeah.
definitely pressure to sort this out quickly. So I'm just going to take a minute, and if I can't find it, then we'll do something different. But
So I think that maybe depend on how the meeting was set up because in the webinar mode, there are no breakouts. I think you need to be in the meeting mode for the breakouts to exist.
yeah, it is a meeting, but
Okay, then
yeah,
I have no idea.
yeah. Okay, there we go. Change that, but I'm not sure I can change it now for a meeting that we've already started. So then I think we'll end up talking as a big group, and that's fine. All right, let's do that. That's what I get for organizing these things early in the morning. All right, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see everybody. And what I'm going to do is copy the topics
I can do
into the
that.
chat. Oh, thanks. Cool.
Yeah.
So everyone can see. And I said we'll talk about these as a group. Um,
I'll put them
great.
as separate bullets, so if people want to make
Yeah.
comments inside the chat,
Yeah,
they can
that's a good
thread
idea.
them.
Let's do that as well. All right. And we have a scribe who's willing to take notes. So we'll be able to kind of, and we're also recording this for people who aren't able to attend today. Um, so yeah, so we're curious to hear from you all about this. So let's start with the kind of the education one on education in time of AI. This obviously somewhat falls from the AI webinar that we had last month, but I think a lot of us are struggling with how does this change things? And what, those of us that are directly teaching students, is it just mostly coming up with ways that they don't cheat? Is it, you know, fundamentally changing what we do and, maybe doing some soul searching about what are we all doing here anyway? Or what are people's thoughts about this?
Can I dive in with a thought or
Yeah,
two?
yeah.
Right.
Go ahead, Martin.
So this is, you're right. It's an interesting one, and I think it's both this. What does it mean for teaching students, and what does it mean for the sort of professional services, research, software, and engineering inside of it? And I was having a chat with someone a few days ago about a workshop they wanted to run, and somebody made the comment that one of the things they're beginning to spot is that they are getting PhD students, particularly, coming along with even shitter code than they used to write because they've churned it out of Copilot or whatever other tool. Now, I think we've all worked with PhD students, and some of us have been PhD students, and you know that they're troublesome characters. So they were thinking, what does this mean for them and their HPC and RSE teams? And we sort of came up with this idea that it might be thinking about how we shift from sort of understanding syntax to perhaps being verifiers of code. And traditionally we've we've always concentrated on the mechanics, the MPIs and the open MPs and all that lovely CUDA syntax stuff. But these AI coding assistants that so many people seem to use now, they've sort of reduced the barrier to writing code, but they've increased sort of the volume of bad code. And what we used to do as educators, that we were teaching, that we used to teach them the syntax, and they sort of built up their models from the ground up. But perhaps we now need to think a bit more about how we teach them to be architects and verifiers rather than just writers of code. So we've got to sort of go from the top down and try and sort of meet in the middle somewhere. Because I don't know, I don't think you can escape knowing the syntax and knowing the mechanics if you're a a HPC adjacent PhD student or postdoc. So that was one of the things that we were talking about, and I just wonder whether anyone else has come across those same issues.
Kevin, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. So just to answer the two questions there, my first comment is what I see students doing, or rather what they think they're doing, is they're using Gen AI to automate their homework, right?
Mm-hmm.
They may also be thinking, or maybe they don't even think about it, that that's automating their learning. They kind of don't see as doing the homework as part of the learning process. They just seem to see it as a chore to get through, some kind of trial or hazing ritual that the lecturer is giving them. I don't know. But I think what the key thing mentioned there was the idea of a model, which is when we teach students the basic syntax, we trying to help the students build up a mental model of programming. And I fear that using Gen AI as a shortcut, as it were, debilitates that. They can't, they don't follow a more disciplined approach to building up that mental model. And hence they have issues with understanding what programming is, what they're actually trying to do. Because programming is just, automating a solution to a problem. But basically, you still have to solve that problem. At the same time, I can understand why students are turning to Gen AI because, uh, so we've taught Python for a long time as an easy to learn language. But one of the problems with Python is that it's actually a very large ecosystem. You don't solve problems in just raw Python. You go out there and find the appropriate Python modules that'll help you solve your particular problem. And that's vast. And that's why particularly postgrad students who aren't computer science students would start by Googling for snippets of code that they can learn from. The problem, as has been mentioned, is that when you use Gen AI for that, the code you're getting back isn't very good. Which, as a lecturer, I kind of have two minds about, because one thing I know as a teacher is that a student rarely learns when they have to correct a mistake. That's true learning. But when there are too many mistakes, that actually hinders the process. So that's as far as I've got in my observation of the students going through our winter school who are trying to use Gen AI to do things. And it's not just our students, it's our users. People try to use Gen AI to write a job script to submit to the cluster. And then it fails horribly because, there are obvious mistakes in it if you've looked at any of our documentation, but they're trying to short circuit that, or they don't understand the basics. So I think it boils down to that lack of a mental model. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking quite a bit here, so I'll stop at that stage. But I think that those are the two key comments I have on this aspect. Thank you.
It's interesting to me that it includes your winter school students, just because those are self-selected. Those are people who have deliberately said, like, I'm going to take, I forget if it's a week or two, but I'm going to take this chunk of time and go and learn things about HPC. But yet still, your impression is that they're maybe sabotaging some aspects of that learning because they aren't really building their model. That's interesting to me.
Yes, and I think it boils down to the fact that they think they're automating the homework exercises. It's a lot like some people have referred to what OpenAI, etc., are trying to build is the computer on Star Trek. And if you know anything about Star Trek, particularly Next Generation, the computer there was always an answer engine. The crew would ask it for factual things like, computer, would this work, kind of thing, or what's the measurement of this kind of thing. So it was always factual. The writers were actually very clever to make sure that it was the human characters that made the connections and so on. So I think that because these large language models are so unreliable, I mean, the figures I've seen are like 85% accurate, which means you're talking at 15% error rates, that the answer engine is broken. And that's what students are looking for. Whereas before they would Google, and hopefully Google would, take them to something like Stack Overflow or other places with snippets of code that were human written, and hence at least had some thought behind them, or were written by people who understood what they were doing, as opposed to the generated snippets of code, which are usually wrong. But yes, you're right. I mean, the students are self-selected, but the interesting thing I think we see with online courses is that the students like online courses because they think it's going to be intense or it won't take much time. And it's almost like it's a time scheduling problem for postgrad students. they want to do something quickly. They need a quick answer. And that seems to be a pressure that's hard to fight against.
Makes sense.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah. Anna, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah. Yeah, so I completely, agree to what has been just said, especially that we learn by, doing, mistakes, right? But like Gen AI sometimes can be a useful shortcut, we all know how many, packages are, in a Python, it's around 140K, like some, insane numbers. So it's really not humanly possible like to know about all of them. So if you know anything, Gen AI can be like a useful, like a shortcut, right? Like to quickly find out what can fit the best your, purposes, So that's one aspect. But then, another side of that is that just our brains are not made like to process, information that fast, when we get those ready-made, answer, we are likely really not to, remember them, like a long term, right? So, although, it can give us like that benefit of time, to try more models, to do more, testing, like to, enable us to do more, creative, synthesis and to ask, like a better questions. I'm just wondering, like, what is the long-term, impact on our learning and our ability like to build like a basic skills, right? So in a sense it can be helpful to somebody who is already established, who already has the body of the learning, right? It can make them more efficient, but on some more like a junior level, I don't think it can be that beneficial. More probably can impede learning. So yeah.
Yeah, there's this tension, right? Because it's here to stay, and as you said, it's certainly good at helping us wade through large numbers of Python packages or these kinds of things, and sometimes help us figure those things out very quickly. But that's a positive. But then there are also these these detriments as you mentioned as well, and you know figuring it out ourselves, and then also trying to communicate that to people we might be educating or training. I think is part of the challenge. Dave, I think you were next.
I'm kind of thinking about it in terms of maybe not so much HPC education, but computational science education, in the sense that um, so much for me of learning how the mathematics work and how the algorithms work was the act of programming it, and I worry about that. I worry. I think for task management, things like that, if a Slurm script isn't as optimized as it could be, uh, you know, that could be improved, but it's not necessarily going to always make things right or wrong. Um, but in terms of, whether the numbers you're getting are right, if you're not building the model right, I do think verification validation is a huge piece of what we need to be teaching and making sure people are thinking about, and using AI can be part of that. But I just think at the point that people are learning the algorithm, if you're not really looking at it line by line with code, I do worry that something is lost there. To me, that was how I would not have learned the math as well if I hadn't had to get the computer to do it for me.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I like your point also about verification and validation because I think, tying in with what Kevin had said earlier about the, maybe 85% accuracy, right? You're likely to get code, especially on a first attempt, you're very likely to get code that doesn't work. And so you need to be
Mhm.
able to know, I think it's realistic to assume that, you know, people ourselves included may have chunks of code that are generated that way, but then you need to make sure that you are able to test it and make sure that it's doing the thing that you think it is doing. Which, yeah, you guys are talking about in the chat too. Andrew, what were your comments?
Hey, so I was gonna not comment at first because I was thinking, people who don't know me, I am in the HPC carpentry project, and the AI has mostly not impacted our pedagogy at all. And but during the conversation, I was kind of thinking about why, and I think it's because we don't have homework, right? So in the HPC carpentry world, it's a hands-on, real time typing along with the instructor type setup. And so there is no opportunity or no straightforward opportunity to like go somewhere else and find another solution. You are guided by the instructor. And maybe that's an answer. Part of the, I guess one of the sub questions was what can we do differently? And maybe homework is over, right? Maybe co-working is how we instruct going forward. And in the carpentries world, we're already there. Um, but I enjoyed some of the other discussion too. And I was thinking one of the things that I've read about this was somebody was like, it was actually in the topic of essay writing, and they were like, one of the things that they have done successfully to motivate students to not use AI so much is to sort of double down on like what is the purpose of this exercise, right? For the homework. Like it's just like it's not because there's a shortage of mediocre essays on the American Revolution, right? It's because you need to learn how to synthesize sources and summarize them in a document that somebody else can consume. And the topic is an example. And so the fact that there's a bunch of essays out there you could draw from is cheating yourself. So in the code world, that kind of the verification and validation is also part of that, right? Like so you need to understand that like the code that you're writing is like it's not there's no shortage of mediocre FizzBuzz implementations either, right? So like you the point is not that. The point is you need to understand how this is going to fit into the larger context, how this is going to solve the larger computational problem that it's part of. And I guess another thing we can do differently as instructors, and this is not something we do in carpentries, is like emphasize the sort of broader context in which this lives, and the real purpose of learning this is so that you can have a facility to solve the real problems. Like the homework problem is not the real problem. It's a means to the real problem.
Yeah, and it requires, I think, a certain amount of maturity or willingness of the students to take that, right?
Yeah.
To hear that and understand the benefits of the long term. Steve, yeah, I know that you've served on a ACM committee kind of
Yeah,
investigating
I was gonna say
AI.
we completed a survey of I think over 500 people in ACM that are teaching programming, and I think what's happening is a shift in strategies of how they're teaching, and I think that's what we need to think about. So they're trying to use Gen AI as a supplement rather than the first thing, and they use it to do things like make student look at more examples. And Gen AI can generate a large number of examples, make them criticize the code that they're getting from Gen AI, um, reducing the value of homework and instead focusing on better software design, uh, you know, uh, checking your homework, working in a group to create a project that actually has a real endpoint uh, other than just teaching syntax. So I think a lot of people are the point is a lot of people are wrestling with other teaching strategies. I mean, Gen AI is not going to go away. So the question is, how do you integrate it in a way that you can still ensure that students are getting the uh, information and skills that they need to actually do things the right way. So I think that's where we need to go.
Is your is your committee that's working on that, is the intent that they are going to produce a report or some kind of synthesized data product at some point?
Yeah, there is a report, and it'll be officially out in February. I'll be glad to post it. Uh,
Yeah,
and,
interesting.
and the reason we're holding it is that we're applying for uh, a a paper, and if we had the report released, the paper would not be anonymous in its review. So we had to hold it until the review process is over. But and we're also making a presentation about it at the SIGHPC meeting in February in St. Louis. So when the report is released, I'll be glad to get a link to this group. But I think there's some very interesting things that come out of that. So
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd be interested to see that too. I'm also curious, I don't know if your surveys touched on this at all, but to what extent, so one of the things that I think is sometimes challenging about this is you end up in a mindset, and I mean students have always cheated since the dawn of time, but you end up with a mindset where essentially you feel like you have a Red Queen problem with the students, right? We were just trying to like you get into a space sometimes where you're trying to engineer assessments and other things that they can't use Gen AI on. And I feel like it can change the relationship between the instructor and the students if you get into this mindset of like, well, I have to come up with a way so that they can't cheat or this and that. And I'll be curious to see if kind of based on your surveys, if other people have been wrestling with that as well.
well, I think what many people say is that they don't want to spend their time trying to find cheating, so they have to figure out a better way to assess things, and that's why they're experimenting with all these other ways of doing things, even down to even some of them are doing pencil and paper tests or
Yeah.
oral exams or something to make sure the students really understand the code.
Our oral exams are supposed to be great just generally in terms of being able to, accurately assess students and also give them an opportunity to demonstrate knowledge. But
Right.
I also know some of them get terrified by oral exams. So. Let's see, Kevin, I think you were next.
Thanks. Sorry, I think I was commenting on what Andrew said about no homework. That, I think, is the approach that we settled on last year's winter school because we realized that time constraint. So, in other words, the students would know that the 2 hours of each interactive session was all they needed to commit to. But it also had the other benefit we found, and I'm glad you mentioned oral exam, was we asked the students to give a 5-minute lightning presentation on their own job script. But I think what helped us was our phrasing was, you can ask us questions about your job script if you're struggling with it, rather than saying the students need to give us a presentation on a job script that we then mark, as it were, that we grade that. And that seemed to get a much more positive response from the students. They were much more willing to show their job script and even admit if they'd used ChatGPT to generate it and then it wasn't working and they wanted to know why. And I think that plus doing something similar with the other interactive sessions helped a lot. And it also circled back to really getting the students to think about, as you mentioned, why we're doing this. What's the goal? Is so they can understand enough that they have this new skill that they can use to turn their workflow into a job script that they can run on a cluster. In other words, to get their work done. So I think, yes, that's key. And I think that's one of the key things that we have changed and that will continue to change in many of our other courses in order to adapt back to a more pure form of teaching, which is interactive, responsive to the students' needs, rather than I fear a form of teaching that has become a habit because we try to scale. So we try to make our teaching as efficient as possible, which is now being tripped up by the fact that automating the homework via Gen AI defeats that that efficiency. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah. Ludovic, you've been patient. Thank you.
No worries, no worries. Very interesting comments, so really nice. Speaking about courseworks, it reminds me of the first rule of client-server security, which is you cannot trust anything coming from the client. Video games had to learn it the hard way. And students doing things at home, it's the same thing. In theory, you cannot trust anything they produce, but it's not AI that made that a reality. Before AI, not so many years ago, there were ghost writers that were very popular, students hiring the services of someone else to do the coursework on their behalf. But before that, it was their family members. And before that, it was just the rise of the internet itself. And before that, just computers with people using spreadsheets to do math courseworks. And before that, it was calculators. And it's just a much more global challenge of not having the incentive to complete the coursework, not seeing the value of completing the coursework itself. So how much of that failure is on them and how much is on us educators not having conveyed the fact that doing that was going to give them value? Debate's open. But it makes me smile because I am encountering something similar in Australia right now. Not in HPC, but for my motorbike test, the driving test. I have people advising me, oh, do you know what? Take a motorbike from one of the instructors because they have much less powerful motorbikes. So it makes your life much harder, much easier, and it increases your chances to pass the test. And I tell them, you don't understand. I want to pass the test on my motorbike. It's more powerful, but it's the one I'm going to ride. So if I fail because I cannot ride this thing safely, I must fail a test. I shouldn't try to get myself in a way to get the test, and then when I'm on the road with my motorbike, I'm in danger. The whole thing is I need to be able to ride safely this thing that I have. So it's interesting how people struggle to get this mindset where the value is really the skill at the end, not the number on the piece of paper. However, AI does bring something that is really nice to the table, which is the customization, the personalization. One tip I was giving to the students back in the UK, when we were talking about MPI sending modes, for example, many modes very hard to remember or very tricky at first, and I was telling them, well, use AI and ask AI to create mnemonics for you to remember the different modes. And it was creating nice sentences, very easy to remember. Or ask for analogies. You don't really understand the difference between buffered, unbuffered, synchronous, asynchronous. Fine, you're really knowledgeable in what? No, video games, cars, music. Just ask AI to produce analogies. AI is great at doing this. If you're someone who needs a lot of details, or if you're someone who's if we follow VARC models or classic things, if you're really a visual learner, try to ask AI to produce pictures to help you understand what you're struggling to understand. And that type of customization is very hard for a lecturer to do on the fly when they have 200 students in the room, or even 50 students. 50 students, you may have 17 different learner profiles. So you cannot split yourself in as many teaching styles simultaneously. So you can teach the core and then let the AI do the customization behind the scenes by turning your learners into the independent learners that ideally they can become, and then you effectively just partner with AI. So there can be that, and we observe this in, Kevin, you were touching on the fact that online teaching was very popular. And one aspect I think that motivates this, according to the user survey we had at POSI when we were analyzing how our learners like to learn, online learning was coming first, and the reason they were giving for this is self-paced learning. They can do it at their own pace. They can repeat the unit, they're not missing anything else, they can pause at any time to Google something else, they can use AI to rephrase the problem. So there is really this AI audience we have now who is quite prompt oriented. They are used to query, they're used to rephrase the problem, they're used to have the explanation tailored to them. And that type of interaction is something we may want to embed more and more in our education landscape, I think.
Thanks, Ludovic. I like your point about how, there's some things like you mentioned, the analogies or mnemonics or these things that it can be particularly useful for. And I think this is part of what kind of we are all, I mean, everyone, but us here too are figuring out is this, what do we encourage people to use, because it is very helpful. There's not, and it's facilitating learning as opposed to, approaches which are maybe, removing the learner from the process and just make you somebody who's kind of spitting out the answers you got from Gen AI. So I think that's part of the evolution of the technology. Like, as you mentioned, like any technology, right, where you figure out what can I use it for that facilitates my learning and what should I avoid that takes away from it. So, but yeah, no, I think thank you for sharing your perspective on that. I think we'll move to the other topics here for this discussion, but I appreciate this good conversation about it, and it encourages us to continue to have the chapter continue to facilitate some of these discussions as we're all kind of having our own journeys here and figuring out what makes sense. It's very helpful to hear what what other people are doing and other people's experiences, and how we, make sure that, students are appreciating the value of, learning this stuff, and steps that we can make to facilitate that. So thank you for that. So yeah, the second topic is and we can put the third one up too, Brian, and we can let people talk about either one. Um, is pretty open-ended here, not just restricted to Gen AI, but I'm curious if there are, technologies or tools or approaches or other things that maybe you are aware of, but that you wish you understood better or knew how to use. And then the third one is helping us understand, participation in the chapter. One of the challenges that we always kind of seem to face is that, with the in-person workshops, for example, we get 50 to 100 people probably attending those, um, and a lot of enthusiasm for education and training outreach related activities, but then coming up with ways to kind of continue that momentum and encourage people to join and participate beyond the in-person events continues to be a challenge. And so I'm curious for thoughts from this group about um, things you think would help you or others participate in the chapter.
Well, should I say something? Well,
Sure, if you have something you want to share. Yeah.
right. Well, we can always help, bridging the skills gap. So I mean, the field of, parallel computing is definitely what Gen AI is not great at, and that's simply because there is not, enough of that code, online, like to be learned from, right? So, that is still something that we can contribute to, right? So, we can insist more on those fundamentals when it comes to parallel application, right? And then also more, I guess, of the practical resource sharing, right? Sharing things that are already out there, so it will be good if we have like a centralized hub um of online, let's say, existing like a trainings that are already out there, right? So maybe we can have a project where we are scraping like the data on the subject, and having that, available, on the website.
Yeah, thanks. Georgia, noticed your chat comment about wanting to understand how to make self-paced learning more impactful. Because yeah, that makes sense. Self-paced learning can be a valuable way that then students can engage, obviously at their own speed. But yeah, making sure that students are still able to get a lot out of it when they're not in the group setting and they don't have peers to kind of bounce ideas off of in the same way can, yeah. So that's a good one. Sorry, I'm reading movie fix comment. Yeah, that's a challenge, right? Because obviously, I mean, like so many things, right? In order to do it well, it takes a lot of time and energy, right? In order to design something that, connects to multiple learners and addresses accessibility issues and all this is a bigger effort than not. But I think that effort, like you say, is required if you are trying to connect with people and help them learn, on their terms, which will then translate into help them learn more effectively.
And maybe there is an aspect when it comes to designing or trying to get more impactful or more engaging experiences. The knowledge on the technical topic itself is needed to cover the topic. However, there is a perpendicular is maybe not the right term. There is another dimension to that, which is the efficiency with which you can transfer that knowledge. And that is the pedagogy, which is an entire field that has an entire set of abilities and skills and areas to explore, to learn, to acquire. So even remaining aware that there's such a thing called pedagogy that can take years for some people to do degrees in, the same way computer scientists had to spend years to do computer science degrees. Pedagogists had to spend years to do pedagogy degrees. So becoming aware of these literature, so the VARC model, all the type of, even being aware of the fact that there are multiple types of archetypes of learners and the different phases of presenters. I think it was Knight who was talking about this. The feed forward compared to feedback, all the difference between an assessment and the mark. There is a lot to do in this area about educators to become more aware about the pedagogy behind the scenes, which is exactly what's going to turn someone very knowledgeable in a technical field into someone able to efficiently transfer that to a wide audience effectively. But people who know me know it's one of my pet peeves. So. I sound like a broken record on this.
No, good. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate the other comments in the chat. Veronica's and Anna's as well. Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point, Anna. That sometimes the kind of onboarding pathway is pretty steep for people who are getting started and trying to get that experience or figure out how to get an allocation or these kinds of things. That's good. Any specific thoughts about, things that we should be doing to help people be more engaged with the chapter activities, either certain kinds of activities or certain communication pathways? Or one of the things we floated, for example, is the idea of trying to have some maybe more casual kind of online meetups where, essentially instead of it being, maybe a webinar specific topic, it's more of a, get together and talk about projects you've been working on, or ask people questions, or but give people more of an opportunity to just talk about, things they've been up to. Do you think that for example, is something you might be interested in, or something else? Thank you for the correction, Brian. All right. We'll continue to think about opportunities for the chapter to encourage engagement. Thank you all for participating in the discussion. I always enjoy getting to talk to you all and hear your perspectives. Everybody brings, their own knowledge and experience, and I think it's really informative to get together and hear from you all. What we'd like to do now is transition to Veronica, who's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the activities and things that are coming up in 2026. So I'll let you share screen and take it away.
Can you actually see my screen?
Not yet. Yes.
And is it the right screen? Okay, so as
it says you've started, but I don't. It
okay, so
hasn't
that's
shown
not
us
right
the slides
screen.
yet. Yeah.
Oh.
There we go.
And you can actually see the slides.
Yes, it's presenter mode, but we can see the slides.
Well, that's not the right screen then. That's what displays. Is that better?
Yes.
Hey, small technical difficulties.
Hey, I could make breakout sessions happen, so you're all good.
Absolutely. We do have at least one session already scheduled, so we'll have the Gutenberg webinar where Alistair Wilson from the University of Oxford will be talking a little bit about the platform they developed. So it's both an open source research and teaching platform. And I know some people have already started playing with it, so we thought it would be useful for the community to kind of learn what it is and how it differs from other things out there, as more and more similar tools are being published. And we also are planning to organize a follow-up webinar to the one that happened in December. And also we had a bit of a discussion around Gen AI in education. So based on the report that Steve mentioned, we'll have another webinar. We still need to pick a date, but I imagine we'll be in March at the earliest, to make sure we do have some time in between different sessions. We're also, as usual, planning to submit a workshop to both PERC and SC, so please keep an eye on announcements and call for submissions. We usually publish those on the website, but also send an email announcing the deadlines and so on. And this kind of was slightly covered, at least we tried to cover that. But if there's anything you would like to see organized by the chapter, if there are any specific themes or topics that are particularly of interest to the community besides Gen AI and education, because clearly we know that is interesting to everyone, please let us know. And also, Scott already mentioned that, but we are thinking about maybe organizing informal catch-up sessions for people to just come together and share with others what they're currently working on, what the challenges are facing, and so on. And we do need more people to help organize those sessions. If we have more volunteers, we can actually organize more sessions. And even then, if we have a small number of people showing up, as long as those sessions are interesting and useful to people, we are happy to organize them. I have two other announcements. The first one is that this year we'll be doing again the Education Award for Outstanding Contribution to Computer Science Education. This will be the third edition of this award. It's going to be given out at SC, and we'll be publishing more details about the nomination process around March time, and the submissions will be due at the end of May. And all of that will be published on the website. The link on the slide kind of gives a summary of that so far, but it will be updated later on with more details. If you do know someone you think should be nominated, please really think about nominating them, and maybe start thinking about what kind of references you have to ask and of whom to actually support that application. There's still plenty of time, but yes, make sure to think ahead, because it takes time to put together the application. The other announcement is for the elections, chapter elections. We hold this every 2 years, and this is the year we'll be doing it again. So again, the elections will be in April. New officers will take the office around May time, and they will serve for 2 years. We are looking to fill all the positions. Current officers can reapply again. I think there are rules around that. But in most cases, you can apply for the same or different role as well. And those are the roles that are available. And again, we'll be publishing more details on the website in the next few months as well. So that's all from me, at least. Thank you for attending. I don't know if there are any comments or questions around any of the things that I mentioned, or whether we're just happy to just close the meeting.
Thank you, Veronica. I appreciate you talking us through that. Yeah, it's a mentions, I will just reiterate that we encourage you all to consider running. As even if you haven't held a chapter officer position before, I think that the chapter is always improved by kind of new ideas and new energy and new perspective. So we definitely encourage you to consider running, even if that's new for you, and help shape what the chapter does and future directions. So I will also say that I am termed out, so this will be my last meeting as chair. So I appreciate the opportunity to have worked closely with all of you over the past, I think, 4 years as chair. And I'm confident that the chapter will be in good hands and will continue to make good inroads in HPC and computational science education moving forward. And I will, even though I won't be chair, I will still look forward to participating in chapter activities and continuing to hang out with this community. All right, well, thank you all for joining us. And look, Ludovic, we got you. It's still Tuesday there by 2 minutes. So there we go. But no, we appreciate you all joining from wherever you are in the world today. And please continue to let us know if you have ideas or suggestions. You can email us. We're available through the Slack channel. So don't hesitate to reach out if there are ideas you have or things that we can help you with. All right. Well, thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.